Hi, I'm Naomi from Drop In Designs, and today I'm going to show you how to make a basic modern cloth nappy. I've heard a lot of questions lately about the basic things like elastics and your top stitching, layering, etc. So I've decided to do a video tutorial from start to finish of the sewing component of your nappies so that I can show you how it's done and give you some tips along the way. Now it is quite a long tutorial, I do tend to talk a lot, so I've broken it down into 3 steps for you. So you can go to whichever step you feel you need help on the most, or you can just watch the whole thing. Now step 1 is your layering and your initial stitching, so sewing all your layers together. Step 2 is putting your elastics in, and step 3 is your turning and top stitching, so the finishing of your nappy. So we'll get straight to it. Alright, now if you can try and ignore the terribly messy sewing room and table, because I certainly do, I've already cut my nappies pieces out. I've put my snaps in, and I've clipped it together ready to go, because those are the boring bits and you really don't need to see how I do that. I'm using these little wonder clip things instead of pins. I hate pins with a passion, and some people think they put holes in the pool and they cause leaking and all that sort of thing. I think if you pin in your seam allowance then it doesn't really matter anyway, but it's up to you and it's a personal preference. I prefer these, and you can get them from Unique Babies, which is Patricia. She's a lovely lady, so I highly recommend going there. Now I've got my pull with the shiny side down and my micro fleece with the fluffy side in, so basically right sides together. I've actually pinned it upside down because what I want to do is sew with the shiny side of the pull up, but I will deal with that because I'm awesome. Now before you start, you want to make sure you've got your machine set up right. So this is a pretty simple setup when you first start sewing. You've got your straight stitch right in the middle, so no changes to that. I always put my stitch length on 3 for straight stitches, and the reason I do that, very simple, is because it's the smallest stitch length which is easy to unpick. And if you're as prone to making mistakes as I was when I first started out, you're going to want to go with that. Or I probably wouldn't go above a 3.5, otherwise you might find your stitching is a bit too loose. Now I'll move it over here. You can see I've got this funny looking contraption on my sewing machine which is called a walking foot. You don't need one of these to sew nappies. It definitely makes life a lot easier when you're dealing with slippery, stretchy fabrics like this. I had gotten this with my machine and I hadn't put it on for months and months, and when I first put it on my machine I thought, oh, this is silly, it makes no difference, but I tell you what, I sure noticed it when I took it off. So now I always use my walking foot, so that gives you an indication of just how useful it is. Now as I mentioned before, we're going to go with the pull side up, the shiny side up, and we just, I start at the front, that's where I turn through. If you want to turn through somewhere else, particularly if you like tummy elastic, then probably the top of the wings is the best spot for most patterns if you want to put your tummy elastic in. I'm quite happy doing it at the front with this one. This is my own pattern and it doesn't have tummy elastic in it. Now if your machine allows it, do a lock stitch like this. Otherwise you just want to go forward and back a couple of times just to lock it in. Now I'm using a 1cm seam allowance here, you might be able to see that because that's how I've designed this pattern. Most patterns will have it specified, but they're normally a 1.5cm seam allowance. So you can see here I'm not pulling the fabric through the machine when I get to the curve. I'm just turning it nice and gently. And what I'm trying to do is not to keep it at the 1cm mark on my machine at the front of the foot, but where the needle is, because you want your seam allowance to be even with the needle. If you try and do it with the front of the foot, your nappy comes out lopsided. Because you're going this way on this side and then the other way on the other side, your nappy doesn't look even. And you can see here I've got a little bunch of fabric under my foot here. What I do is I just pick that up, straighten it out, and voila. So just pull these little clips off as we get to them. Now, a lot of people talk about tricks to keeping your nappy all lined up and stop it slipping around. For me, you'll see I'm stopping constantly to adjust. That's how I do it. So I'm on a straight bit here, but I'm coming up to a bit of a curve. I find the easiest way to keep the sewing nice and neat when you're going around a gentle curve like this is to pull your fabric a bit straight. And then it's not so hard to get around the curve and keep it neat. Now I know where to turn because my machine has little marks everywhere as to how far you've got left, etc, etc. But if you don't have that on your machine, you'll get used to knowing it eventually, and it's, you know, as long as you're not too far out, it's not a big deal. Just think about how far your stitch length is. If it looks like you've got 3 stitches left, for example, on a 3mm stitch length, that's 0.9mm, which is almost a centimetre. So think about it that way, and that should help. Pattern was designed with lots of straight edges to make it easy to sew. You see here we just do a quick readjustment. The lining's sticking out a bit. Alright, so that's pretty much it. I'm just going to finish sewing around this because now it's getting a bit boring, and then I'll come back to you at elastics.